Y'all remember Hurricane Katrina? The storm that finally let America see what disaster relief looks like in real time. And by disaster relief, I mean not much, because the entire emergency plan was basically everybody leave. Leave with what? On what bus? In what car? With what money in the bank? Some of these folks ain't have enough gas to get to the grocery store, let alone out of the state. Hold on to that bus question. We're going to come back to it. And when we do, it's going to make you mad. That's what we're getting into today. Pull a chair up. Welcome back to History Was Ghetto, the show where we look at the past and ask one simple question. Who approved this? Now today, Hurricane Katrina, a storm so devastating it exposed government failure, media failure, infrastructure failure, and turns out common sense was on back order too. Now, before we get started with this, New Orleans was living its best life. Before Katrina, New Orleans was outside, real outside. Bagonettes in the morning, second line parade by lunch, somebody's uncle on the trumpet you never heard of, but he's better than anybody on the radio. Then the actual hurricane pulled up like, oh, y'all having a good time? Let me fix that. Every disaster in history starts the exact same way. Somebody somewhere says, it'll probably be fine. Always famous last words. Write it down. Right, Justin?
Yeah, man. I sadly I wasn't old enough to remember this, but I heard about it all the time.
So we're going to get into the next segment. The forecasts got real, disrespectful, as a matter of fact. Now, you know it's serious when the weatherman stops smiling. Then Katrina shows up and that same man looks like he just opened his light bill in July. And I already hear somebody in the third chair saying, man, they always overhype these stories, these storms. Not this one, Pop. This one had a permission slip signed by God and the Army Corps of Engineers, both. When a meteorologist says catastrophic, that is not the day to be out here grilling chicken talking about it might miss us. Now, let's jump into the fact that they practiced this exact same storm a year before it happened. And this is the part of the story that should make you put your phone down. In July of 2004, 13 months before Katrina, the federal government ran a practice disaster, a simulation, a fake hurricane, if you will. They called it Hurricane Pam. They had real agencies, FEMA, state officials, local officials sit in a room for a week and war game what would happen if a slow-moving Category 3 hit New Orleans dead on. And Pam predicted, almost to the letter, 120-mile-an-hour winds, levees overtopped, 20 feet of standing water in the city, hundreds of thousands of people trapped with no way out. That's not foreshadowing. That's not bad luck. That is a dress rehearsal. They ran the play. They watched it fail. They wrote down what would happen. And 13 months later, it happened almost exactly like the simulation said it would. And the response was just as unprepared as if nobody had ever run the fucking drill at all.
That's hilarious.
So when people ask, how did nobody see this coming? That's the wrong question. Somebody saw it coming with a PowerPoint presentation. The right question is, what happened to the fucking PowerPoint? Because somewhere there's a guy who ran Hurricane Pam, watched the real thing happen exactly the way he said it would, and never even got a my bad text. Now let's go to the next segment. The levees clocked out early. Now, for all intents and purposes, the flooding did more damage than the storm itself. And the flooding happened because the levees gave out. Here's the part that'll make your blood pressure go up. Those same levees were engineered to handle a Category 3 storm. Katrina hit Louisiana as a Category 3. So this ain't some freak impossible no wall could have stopped it monster. The wall got hit by exactly the storm it was built for, and the wall still lost. The levees folded so fast you'd think they were singing "Come Pick Up Your Clothes" like Kalani. Now, remember that bus question from the top of the show? Here it comes. There were roughly 200 New Orleans school buses sitting in a lot before the storm. Buses that by themselves could have moved somewhere between 13 and 20,000 people out of the city. They never moved. The storm hit. Photos came out after of rows of yellow school buses parked in neat little lines completely underwater, like a parking lot that gave up. 27% of the city, about 150,000 people, didn't have a car. That's not laziness, that's math. You can't drive to safety in a vehicle you don't own. So the plan was everybody leave, and the buses that could have actually moved the people with no other way out just sat in a lot, getting rained on, doing absolutely nothing. Hold that thought too, we're not done with these buses. So now you've got thousands of people with nowhere else to go, crammed into the Superdome. The power barely working, food running low, water running low, toilets giving up before the levees even finished giving up. It turned into the world's worst family reunion. Everybody hot, everybody tired, everybody hungry. And there goes Uncle Ray asking the man in the vest, so what's the plan for the 9th time? And the man in the vest doesn't know either. He's just got a vest. The response was so slow, people in there were acting like Amazon Prime should have already existed. It's been 6 hours. Where's my help? Where's my 2-day shipping? And look, I get it. Help takes time to organize. But it takes time, and then it takes time when you literally ran a drill for this exact same scenario 13 months ago. Pick one. Folks were waiting on government help the same way you wait on that one friend who texts "on my way" and is still very much sitting on their couch. You already know that "on my way" means, in some people's language, it means I haven't left the house, but I will think about leaving the house soon. Multiply that by a city for days. Now, here's the funny part. FEMA got dragged in front of a whole country. Katrina might be the first time on a national scale everybody collectively looked at FEMA and went, so what exactly do y'all do here? People needed boats. They got paperwork. And I already know somebody about to say, well, disaster response is complicated, John. It's not that simple. And to that I say, you practiced it. You had the simulation. You had the script. This isn't a pop quiz. This was an open book test, and y'all still failed it. There's a famous clip of an official getting told he was doing a heck of a job while the city was still underwater. That's the energy. That's the whole energy of the response. You ever watch somebody who got praised for a job they clearly weren't doing? That's secondhand embarrassment you feel in your chest. And the damage total, when it was all said and done, about $125 billion on the conservative side. That's not a typo, that's a B. The costliest storm in American history at that time, on top of a response everybody agreed was an embarrassment. So it wasn't even cheap to be this disorganized. Katrina was one of the first disasters where 24-hour news completely lost the plot. Every 10 minutes, it was a new rumor, a new number, new sources say. It got so chaotic you couldn't tell if you were watching breaking news or listening to somebody's auntie at Thanksgiving who heard it from a friend of a friend. When the news doesn't know what's going on but keeps talking anyway, that's not journalism. That's a really long ass voicemail. Now let's get into block court. I'm going to call this block court. Defendant number one. People who waited until the storm was visible from their front porch to start evacuating and had the means to leave the whole time. Guilty. You saw the news, you saw your neighbors loading up the car, you saw the alert buzz on the TV, and you said, let's see how this plays out. Sir, ma'am, this is not a strategy. That's a horror movie decision. This is defendant number two. Politicians arguing about jurisdiction while people were stuck on rooftops. Extra guilty. Guilty with interest, actually. The city is underwater and certain folks are already at a podium trying to figure out who else they can point the finger at. Nothing gets a politician moving faster than the opportunity to dodge responsibility. That man will sprint. Defendant number three. The 200 school buses charged with sitting there and doing absolutely nothing while the city drowned. The verdict is not guilty. Wait, what? Yeah, not guilty. Because a bus can't drive itself to a neighborhood. Somebody has to give the order. Somebody has to call the driver. Somebody has to say, go. And nobody said go. The buses didn't fail this city. The buses were standing right there, ready the whole time. The plan failed to use them. So the next time you see that photo, all those yellow buses underwater in a perfect little row, that's not a picture of buses being useless. That's a picture of a decision nobody made. Now let's get into how Katrina pulled the sheet off of everything. And here's the part that's not funny, even for this show. Katrina didn't create inequality in this country. It just turned the lights on and let everybody else see it clearly for once. Researchers went back and looked at who actually died in Orleans Parish. And the mortality rate for Black residents was somewhere between almost double and 4 times higher than for white residents. Same storm, same city, wildly different odds of surviving it. That's not a coincidence. That's a zip code problem. The neighborhoods that flooded worse were lower elevation, lower income, and had the least access to a car, a hotel budget, or a second home upstate to ride it out in. And I already know somebody about to say, here we go, making it about race again. Nah, I didn't make it about anything. The Army Corps of Engineers' own report made it about that. I just read it out loud. You found out real quick how different America looks depending on your block. Disasters don't make problems. They expose the ones that were already sitting there quiet, waiting on somebody to notice. Katrina pulled the sheet off the whole house and said, look at this. And that conversation about who gets protected and who gets left, about infrastructure, about whether the next disaster gets a real plan or another Hurricane Pam that nobody listens to, that's still going on today, 20 years later. But here are some of the things that Katrina taught us. Batteries become currency. Forget gold. Give me double A's. Gas stations turn into the Hunger Games the second a storm gets a name. Weather forecasters deserve hazard pay and a little more respect. A government can run a perfect practice drill and still fail the real test. Everybody's got an evacuation plan right up until they hit actual traffic or don't have a car at all. Politicians love a podium more than they love a solution. And 9 times out of 10, it's the neighbors, the church, the corner store, regular people helping each other before the government even shows up. Now, in my final monologue, Hurricane Katrina wasn't funny. I want to say that clearly. But this show is never about laughing at tragedy. It's about looking back at how people in charge responded to it and being honest about how ridiculous a lot of that response really was. Remember that bus question I asked you at the top of the show? Leave with what? Turns out there was an answer parked a few blocks away the whole time. 200 buses, enough seats for thousands of people who had no other way out, just sitting there, getting rained on, waiting on a phone call that never came. That's the whole story of Katrina in one photo. The help wasn't always far away. Sometimes it was parked right there, full of gas, and nobody picked up the phone. 20 years later, people still remember exactly where they were. They remember the rooftops, the Superdome, the waiting, and they remember asking the same question over and over. How was nobody prepared for this? Now you know the real answer. Somebody was prepared. They ran the whole drill a year early and wrote it all down. Prepared just wasn't the same thing as ready. That's why this story still matters, not because it's history, because it's a warning. And if we're being honest with each other, history was ghetto.